everybody. Welcome to Freddy's. My name's Chica.
Thomas here with Much Props, gonna give you another how-to video. My family has a ridiculous amount of birthdays right there together. My wife, her mother, her grandmother, my niece, my younger brother, myself, and a couple of cousins all have birthdays within a 2-week period of each other. And I thought it would be nice to make a build that was birthday related. As I did Google searches, I found Five Nights at Freddy's Mr. Cupcake. And I thought, there's a nice simple build. It's something relatively small, and it's got a candle on top. So let's make a Five Nights at Freddy cupcake, and hopefully it won't get too spooky. Jump scares possible. Let's get the build. In a lot of my videos, I skip the template making process because it can take a lot of time to get one just right. But since this one's relatively simple, I figured I would show most of the process. I also have an entire video dedicated just to template making you can go back and watch. I'll leave links to it down in the description. I found a couple of images in a Google search to use as a reference, constructing the basic shape out of some cardboard and foil, and then once I've got the shape where I want it, I cover the entire thing in a layer of foil with duct tape over it. Once the foil and duct tape are down, I draw out the details with a Sharpie and decide where I want my dividing lines, darts, registration marks, and other helpful markings. Once satisfied, I cut it off of the base. Since this build will be in 2 separate pieces, I do the cupcake top, then repeat the foil and duct tape for the bottom. With my duct tape and foil pattern in hand, I then transfer the shape onto some poster board. I transfer all my markings onto the flat pattern and also include names for each piece, divide them into smaller pieces if they won't fit on an 11 by 8.5 sheet of paper, guess at foam sizes, and add areas that I think need angle cuts or overlays. Most of this is just guesswork, but with over 200 templates under my belt, it definitely does get easier with practice. Once I cut out the poster board and use the patterns in the video, they are taped to the paper, scanned into my computer, and then formatted into a downloadable PDF. My patterns are always free and in the description under the videos that they are on. With the patterns cut out and ready to go, this is normally where I would start my video. For something simple like this build, I was able to knock out the template in just under an hour. For more complex ones, it could take several days, which is why I edit so much of it out. I trace my materials onto some 6mm EVA foam with a pencil, trying to make sure and use as little foam as possible on the roll. Now I'm ready to cut out the parts with my hobby knife. I like to separate pieces into smaller chunks so that they're more manageable on my work surface. Usually I like to start with parts that have angle cuts to get the complicated stuff out of the way. I keep the pattern pieces close by to use as a reference and cut inside of my marks on the pieces. My templates have a cover page that explains all the markings, so if you attempt one of my builds, please read the first page of the instructions. Also tag me in any posts for your attempts on this build or any other build. I love seeing these patterns getting put to good use. I glued a 4mm piece of foam to the back of the eye area for my Mr. Cupcake to help support his eyes later. Now I'm going to heat form my parts with a heat gun. I heat up both sides of the foam. My gun has a digital readout and I change it depending on the density of the foam. Usually it's around 500 degrees or so, but if it's more dense it may have to go higher, or if it's low density it may not be as much. Once the foam becomes a little more flimsy, I push it over a round object. As the foam cools, it retains the shape. This step helps to get the object closer to the final form and reduces the pulling that will happen around the seam lines during glue up. Assembly time. I start by spreading contact cement over all of the edges that will be connected. After a couple of minutes, they are ready to tack together when they're no longer wet. Following the registration lines, line each piece up and work around the object slowly, trying to keep the surface areas flush. As long as it's close, you can fix proud parts by sanding later. And foam is pretty forgiving, so if you get off of the registration marks a little bit, it's not really a big deal. You can force it back into place. face. Once I finish the cupcake top, I go to put the teeth on and realize that they're a little bit too small, so I make a new pair, fix the template, and glue them onto the inside of the head. For the eyes, I'm going to make them out of 10mm EVA foam. You could just as easily use a round object like a ping pong ball or something. Generally, I try to limit the types of materials so that when I go to paint, there's not a bunch of different surface textures and things that I have to deal with. I cut out the circle, then with my rotary tool, I round over the top of the foam. First with a sanding disc and then with a stone bit to smooth it over. For the eyelids, I just glue down a thin layer of 2mm foam over the top and then cut it around the edges. Once the shape is done, I glue it into place and repeat the same process for the other eye. Two coats of Plasti Dip. The bottom gets black and the top gets red. With the top in red Plasti Dip, hopefully it'll take less coats of the paint to get good coverage. For the rest of the paint job, I'm just going to use some Plat Effects acrylic paint. I mix some colors together to get it to the shade of pink that I want. Then I make a base layer coat of both parts. After the parts are dry, I throw down a second coat. Then once that layer is dry, I start layering on the details. The bottom gets faux indents painted onto them with various shades of brown, and the top gets some dabbing with a sponge of darker pinks as I work towards the top. After all that is done, then I paint on various parts of the eye, let it dry, and then paint on the next layer. In total, it probably took 8 to 10 layers of paint for the entire thing. I almost forgot to put the candle on. I debated on whether or not I wanted to put a fake tea light on there, but since I didn't make the eyes glow like they do in the game, I figured I probably shouldn't make the candle glow either. I don't know, I could just be lazy. I cut an 18mm dowel for the candle, then with the same dowel carve in a point, cut it off, and then round the bottom off to make the flame. I glued the two parts together and then repeat the same painting steps that I just went through, adding several layers to build up the colors. Normally, I glue everything together before paint, but since this is a small object and it's going to be for just display purposes and not really get thrown around a lot, I'm going to keep them separate to make it easier for me when I'm painting. I stand back a spot on the top of Mr. Cupcake's head for the candle to connect to. Attachment is as easy as a little super glue at where the parts will contact each other, and with that, this build is officially done. Happy birthday or belated birthday to everyone out there watching this video. Here's to the day you bless the rest of us by being born. Don't think of it as another year older, think of it as gaining more wisdom, and here's to many more years to come. And we are finished. Here's the end result. He's kind of a little derpy little pastry here, a little cupcakey, yeah. I think it turned out pretty good. It's definitely pretty close to what the picture I was using as a reference looked like, at least, even with the faded texture here of transitioning between the lighter to darker pinks. I think it did a decent job. There are some things that could be adjusted, but for something that I built in maybe 4 hours total, I think it's pretty good. And hopefully you got a little bit from me showing the extra steps, because I do cut that out a lot just to save time, and it can get repetitive after a while. Doing over 460 or 70 videos now here on YouTube, I like to skip parts because it gets boring. But maybe you'll try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to make cupcakes and not use a single edible ingredient, yet they will still ask in the comments if you can eat it. I mean, I guess if you really wanted to. Maybe you'll get some...
Don't get distracted!
And inevitably, they're gonna ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these, tell them, much props.
Howdy there, kiddo. Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I'm Chica the Chicken.
If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.